Cheryl Kalish-Gordon, Senior Commodities and Analyst at Rabobank. Thanks for joining us on Flow.
Hi, Ricky.
Now, just let's talk first of all just about how things are looking across the grain sector here in Australia, especially in New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia in that southeast area.
Well, as a nation, it's a really good story, and including those that region you just mentioned. We're looking at all regions and all states having an improved situation, certainly on the drought conditions we had in recent years. But what's really nice about it is it's a double up, if you will, on the great performance that we had in terms of production last year. So, we're closing in on harvest, and there are talks of records being broken in WA and records equalled across the East Coast in most places. So it's a really good outlook from that perspective. It's not in the bin yet, that grain. Got a little bit to go, but we're almost there. And the nice thing about this season is that it looks like high volumes are going to be coupled with high prices.
Yeah, it's a good combo. Now, the good news also coming out from ABARES across the week saying that prices are not only looking good, but projecting that they'll go up some 4 to 8% across our grains commodities. Canola, that's a different story we'll come to later.
Yeah, look, this year as a whole, we will be in a higher priced environment than we have seen last year. And that really is because we've got favourable global prices as a sustained outlook for this year. And the lower Australian dollar is also helping. And if we look across the commodities, it's cotton prices are good and at levels we haven't seen for a number of years. We've got high grain prices and prices that you wouldn't expect with the volume of grain we had harvested last year, as well as what we're expecting this year. And if you move to the livestock sector, we've got top prices in the dairy sector and on contracts that's holding over the year, and moving then to sheep and beef. Look, we're reaching records, over the last couple of months, and those are set to hold as well. Those higher prices.
Yeah, on the wheat and grains front, how are things looking going into the future? In terms of locking in contracts for future years.
Yeah, look, there's strong interest in doing that because we have seen favourable pricing out over the forward years. I guess, as with anything, it's an annual crop, and with the high prices we've seen, and if you assume that we're going to get a return to average seasonal conditions globally next year, we'll absolutely see a supply response from the Northern Hemisphere. So we would expect there'll be lots of canola planted next year, lots of wheat, and lots of corn and soy. And that will then weigh on global markets after that comes on board, or in expectation of that. But we do need to fill the deficits or refill the stocks in the meantime. So just that hangover of a really large deficit year and low stocks will mean that prices, when they do come back, will still remain relatively favourable, even when we have that supply response from the Northern Hemisphere.
Well, certainly on the canola front, prices are out in front of, say, the other cropping opportunities. How are things looking going forward with that as well? There's some significant supply issues in other parts of the world by the looks of it.
Yeah, look, this is a story that's been growing for a couple of years. So if you look to Europe and Canada being the two main supply origins of the world, and Europe being the number one consumer of canola globally, it itself has had a couple of years of greater deficits than it normally has due to unfavourable conditions. That means it's needed a stronger import program. Now, this year, that's been overlaid by a disaster of a crop in Canada. So a massive dry for them has seen a downgrade in their canola harvest this year from something that was looking like about 20 million tonnes or 19 million tonnes, and that's typically where they play in that market, to what has just been released by Stats Canada as something that's under 13 million.
Right.
So a massive downgrade, and of course that means their export program is severely curtailed and really lifts that demand for Australian canola. And on the good side of things, we're looking at estimates that some people say look close to 5 million tonnes.
And what about are biofuel mandates driving that to some degree, and are they likely to grow or continue to be needed on the government side?
Look, certainly in Europe, that's a prevailing story, and that's where they have the deficit because they do have ongoing demand for biofuels, where they can use soy or they can use canola or palm oil. And, over the rest of the decade, we expect that there will be an increased demand for canola oil and specifically GM-free canola oil from Australia, simply because that meets their targets in terms of the biofuel mandates. Palm oil will be phased out over the end of the decade, and GM-free product for them means that it's useful across their feed complex in terms of the meal that's created. And so that's an ongoing story with some uplifts at the end of this decade expected. But the big other bit of new news in this sector, I guess, is that biofuel and renewable diesel mandates in North America, in the US and in Canada are leading to a forward forecast of an additional need for close to 6 million tonnes of canola for that program of mandates in those two countries. So there's investment in place at the moment to increase their crush capacity. And so with that coming online in 2024, there is going to be an increased demand and fewer exports out of that North American complex. So it's a really interesting and interesting period ahead, and with opportunity for Australian canola growers.
I guess just lastly, coming back to barley, I think there was something noted earlier this week that the case in the WTO regarding China has sort of moved on to the next important phase, but it doesn't look like there's going to be any immediate relief even for a few years, if anything even comes of that case.
Look, that's typically the case with cases in the WTO, and at the outset of the announcement from China, we were never going to expect this to be resolved quickly, and I would have put 5 years on it as a minimum where we would see any sort of resolution on this one. Fortunately, Australia has been very much able to capitalise on a deficit in global feed markets and capture some, a lot of exports into the Middle East, but also go further afield and find new markets in the likes of Mexico, and then develop some markets that have been sort of developing over the last couple of years, but increase those more in the likes of Thailand. So not expecting that Chinese barley market to come back soon.
Well, yeah, at least on the plus side, alternate markets are being found, which state governments are getting behind in all sorts of commodities to help them find new destinations. So, Cheryl Kalish-Gordon, thanks for helping us unpick what's always a complex picture, very valuable for our people on the land.
Thanks, Ricky.